Welcome back, everyone, to Web3 Unpacked. I'm Rich Pasqua, and joining us today, we are pleased to have Pat White, CEO and co-founder of Bitwave, a digital asset finance platform for enterprise solutions that helps mitigate complexity of digital accounting. Welcome, Pat.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be on, and this should be a fun little podcast here to talk about accounting and digital assets and all things crypto.
Yeah, for sure. And I've been researching you and your company, and you guys are doing a lot of great stuff. You have an actually amazing background as a software engineer, an architect. You've worked with Microsoft, Cisco. Pretty impressive and like real solid background. And now you're an entrepreneur. And maybe you've been an entrepreneur for many times, who knows? But I'm always curious to learn how people started their Web3 or crypto journey.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I've been in tech my entire life. It's funny, I always joke about this. There's only two jobs I've ever wanted in life. I mean, one, when I was like 3 years old, I wanted to be a paleontologist. And sometimes I still think that might be better than being an entrepreneur every now and again. And then when I was like 6 or something, I wanted to do computer businesses. I mean, that was always my entire life. So, I've worked on a number of startups. I've worked for a number of big tech companies. I tend to like the little companies a lot more than the big companies. It's so hard to make an impact. There's so much inertia at big companies that little startups tend to be a lot more fun, and you can do a lot bigger things. I've been in crypto forever. So I got in crypto in, let's say at this point, 2009, 2010. I have some code contributed to the Bitcoin core node. Like I got into Bitcoin very early on. I even remember, I remember it like it was yesterday. I saw the Bitcoin white paper when it got posted up to Slashdot. So Slashdot was a tech news site back in the day. It's still around, but I don't think anyone uses it or reads it. But it was sort of the hacker news of its generation. And someone posted the white paper, and I read it, and I immediately loved it. It might have something to do with I hate banks, and so like I've always really despised banks and sort of the way we centralized monetary management in this country is terrible. So I mean, it's a sort of an artifact of, I always sort of poke fun of myself here, but I'm an early millennial, and part of that means that I've never been in a period where there was any purpose of having your money in a bank. Like in my entire life, where we are today is the highest interest rates I've seen in my entire like 40 years on Earth. It is the highest interest rates today. So there was no point in my life where there was any reason to ever have money in a bank, other than every now and again they'd charge you interest or they'd charge you fees and things like that. So I always hated banks. And so the first time I read the Bitcoin white paper, it clicked with me. I really liked it. I thought it was a really clever solution to a hard computer science problem. So I'm a computer scientist by training also. So that's a cool part about it, is it was a really clever solution to a really, really hard computer science problem that is ultimately what Satoshi came up with. And I started doing it. But unfortunately, like my entire career is mostly in enterprise software. And I'll tell you, in 2010, in 2009, 2010, there were no enterprises using crypto. It was all retail. It was all exchanges. It was folks that were passionate about it like I was, but businesses were not touching with a 10-foot pole, except for there were a couple of businesses like, one of the custodians at the time was Zappo. And it was a funny company. Like I think they're still around actually, but back then they had this whole pitch where they bought one of the bomb shelters in Switzerland, and they had this like air gap, they had this airlock system, and they had an air gap machine where they kept all their keys, and it was this incredibly complex system. And I'm like, that's not. And they had guys with guns and stuff. That's not really what I want to do with my life. Like I like enterprise software. I like solving like hard problems. So that's how I got into crypto. Yeah, all those years ago, and then I just sort of followed it since then. I just kept up, bought some Bitcoin. I remember I had to sell the majority of my Bitcoin at one point in 2013 to pay rent 1 month. Which I think it was like, it was like $3,000 of rent that in retrospect is like, I don't know, like $400,000 of rent I paid for that month. But it's that's part of the fun journey on this stuff.
Yeah, and it is a journey. And you brought up a ton of great points there. And I think it's important for people, either whether you're in it just for a little bit or you're just getting started or whatnot, to understand kind of the road. It was quite bumpy back in the day. It was nerve wracking. It was new. And it was crazy. And, frankly, your journey started much like mine, probably a 1 or 2 years earlier, which is awesome. And I read the white paper from Satoshi or the cypherpunks, whoever you choose to believe started that. I think you might
or
be
the
a
NSA.
cypherpunk
That's
guy.
what I choose to believe. The NSA wrote it, but that's okay.
Maybe. Absolutely. That might be the truth. But it is a great journey. And I got into mining and building my own rigs, and I'm sure you did the same thing.
Yep.
I think I read somewhere that you built a rig and then turned it into a gaming PC. I did the same thing. I bought 6 GPUs and then realized in New York it's not really profitable, let's say, based on a lot of things in New York, specifically the energy bills. And then I tore it down and I built 2 multiple PC gaming, GPU gaming rigs for my son and I.
Yeah, very, very similar journey. And it's funny, as I ran that until I don't know if it was profitable, but I always had like a long view of it. I ran my rig, at the beginning when I first started it up, I think I was mining a Bitcoin a week or something. And then basically by the time I shut it down, not that long late, let's say like 3 to 6 months later, it had already dropped to like 1 Bitcoin a year kind of thing. Like that's how quick that tech changed. I mean, it went overnight. It went from, you could actually make, because back then Bitcoin was like $600 or something. So like you could make like $600 a week. I mean, that's like a good side hustle, right? That's not like full-time job. It's a fun little side hustle. And then overnight, the actual productivity is plummeted of the of mining, of like running your own mining rig. And now, I think no one does it anymore except for validators.
Yeah. It exponentially, like overnight, you're right. It just kind of, the lights dimmed a little bit. I was mining Ethereum and it's great. And you brought up something else about your rent. And I think it's important to touch on this. And again, this is not financial advice, but it is okay to take earnings, right? It is, and I don't touch certain digital assets, and I won't for a very long time. But Ethereum, I would drip out for emergencies if needed, and it's there, and it's really nice to have that cushion.
No, it's money. I mean, at the end of the day, like you gotta pay bills, you gotta do all this stuff. I think the thing that, again, not financial advice. I mean, I tend to be very cautious about people taking out, like I tend to be skeptical of people taking out big loans or mortgages to buy crypto. I mean, crypto still is probably one of the most speculative assets that are out there. I think everybody who is a financial advisor will say that it's the absolute like tip of the spear. The single most speculative high risk asset you have is crypto, and then everything else is kind of below that. Penny stocks are below that. Everything else. So it's one of those things. Like it's if you make money on it, spectacular. It's great to take profit on it. Don't put yourself into lifelong debt for it. That's not It might work out for somebody. It might not work out for you, and just be very careful about that.
Yeah, and timing is everything. I've heard
timing's everything.
Horror stories of people, leveraging their homes or their savings accounts or retirement accounts to bump this, get a bump in the game and get into it. Not the right thing to do, but that's just me. That's just me.
Watch out for your family and your retirement first, and then the fun crypto stuff.
Yeah, exactly. But I'm a true believer. I do believe it's going to go. Things are going to go pretty high. I'm not going to speculate on here. People say, I've heard other people say, 40 this week, then 140, by the summer or by next year. So, hey, I'm in it for the right reasons. And with that said, do you actually, do you feel that young people getting into crypto now truly understand how it started and why it's there?
It's one of those things. I don't think very many people at all really understand. Like, it's I tend to think back to some of the early. So the one of the things I always think back to is the early block size debate within the Bitcoin community, and I think that very very few people have a lot of context around that early debate, which then leads to like where we are today with this incredibly fractious set of different interests and motivations in people who are in crypto today. Because even back then, I mean, it's one of those funny things that like even back then, there was a lot of fracture in the community. The block size debate happened in 2015, 2016, something like that. But it had its roots in 2010 and 2011 with this long discussion about is Bitcoin really a source of a currency that you're going to be using on a day-to-day basis? Or is it something that you're going to put money into and save it there and store it there for a long time? And even the white paper, like I tend to argue a lot about this, that even the white paper was internally inconsistent about whether or not it's a store of value or a tradable currency. And the basic reason for that is the white paper outlined a currency that was deflationary. And like everything we know about economics from the last 500 years tells us that deflationary currencies don't get spent. That's the whole point of them. That's why governments work so hard to create inflation. And so it's like even if you read the white paper and project it forward, every divide that we have today in crypto is directly related, in my opinion, in many ways, to early internal inconsistencies of the white paper. Like if Satoshi had come out and just written a white paper that was all about a spendable currency that was going to be inflationary and would encourage spending, or if he'd only wrote about a store of value where you wanted to be censorship resistant and incredibly hard for the government to stop and all that kind of stuff. If he just wrote about one of those two things, crypto itself's foundations would have been a lot more about that. If he just written about payments, then crypto would have been a payment thing from the very, very beginning. If he just written about store of value, it would have been that. Now, it's the funny part about it is he wrote about both of those problems, and different people who had different perspectives on life picked up different parts of the white paper. Some people who hated banks really picked up on the store of value, and some people that hated credit card companies really picked on the payment piece of it. And that then just led to more and more. That led to Ethereum versus Bitcoin. It led to every single divide we ever had came off of that. And I'm not sure a lot of people really realize, because you pick your poison in this world. Like, is it decentralization? Is it cost? Is it self-empowerment? Like, what is it that you like about crypto? And from the very, very beginning, people took the white paper and picked what they liked about it out of the white paper. And that still happens today. People just pick what they like about crypto, and that's what they tend to focus on. And it continues to be more and more fractious in some ways.
Yeah, and we're seeing, now we see major financial institutions jumping on board. I mean, I think it's a good thing, and it's the question of, what kind of asset is this is just ongoing, and it won't stop. Please stop. Someone make a decision. And it was funny to see, to see people just go on complete tears and rants. Founders of specific platforms and tokens going crazy over this stuff, and I agree with it. And for me, I don't know what bucket I belong in. I think it's all of the above. Actually,
like it all. Just like it all.
I love it all, but 2008 was eye opening for me. The bank collapses, that was eye opening and that was the impetus. Yeah. For Bitcoin.
And I'm not done being bitter about it. For what it's worth, like I just listened to I listened to Michael Lewis's new book on SBF, and then that got me on a kick of listening to Michael Lewis books. So I went back and I listened to a few of his other books, and he had a book called Flash Boys, which is about that 2008 time period. It's about more than that. It's about high frequency trading in general. It's a really interesting book, actually. I mean, it's a book that probably could have been like a long blog post, but it is a really interesting book about the early days of high frequency trading. But one of the things that was in that book was the story about a Goldman Sachs engineer who got arrested for allegedly kind of stealing code. And you read the book, and it's a sham job. The whole thing is complete BS. But it part of what he talked about was how no one from the banking crisis went to jail. And he talked about, like, part of the book goes into real depth of how Goldman itself knew that a lot of the CDOs they were selling were compromised, were underwater, were not going to be worth what they were. But they made money on the transaction fees, and they made money trading against their customers. So they didn't care that it was underwater. And it's like,
Right.
that's like, still to this day, I read about that time period and I still get upset about it. And that's, you have to imagine that's part of what drove so many people in 2010 to just latch onto the white paper so passionately, because we were all so pissed that more people didn't go to jail from Goldman.
Yeah. It definitely a wacky time. And I'm like people say, never forget. I'm not forgetting that. And for me personally, at the end of the day, what crypto in general brings is truth, right? Undeniable truth. I mean, look at the world now. Look at economics. Politicians can't even talk to themselves civilly, right? Where is the trust? That's long gone. But through code and cryptography, you can have a bit of trust, a lot of trust. And that's super important to me.
And that's what the banks that are getting into crypto now, they don't care about decentralization. They don't care about heady goals around empowering people in the third world to control their own money. Like they don't care about any of that kind of crap.
Sovereignty or
no, that's not, they're not in it for that piece. They're in it because they have, crypto, and this is, I mentioned this earlier, like the really hard computer science problem that Satoshi solved was around was around the Byzantine generals problem, which distilled down is, if you have a bunch of people that all hate each other, how do you kind of get them to work together? And like, how do you get them to come to some sort of consensus? That's what he did really smart. And that describes the banks perfectly. Like banks have a Byzantine generals problem. If you look at Goldman versus JP Morgan versus like all the different banks that are out there, all the hedge funds, they're all bitter rivals and bitter competitors. But at the end of the day, like they have to work together to sell. They like if I sell you some stock, you and I have to work together to settle that deal if we're at the bank size level. So crypto, it's blockchain technology is sort of the perfect solution there to like how do you come to consensus between a bunch of people that can't stand each other but do actually in fact have to work together to make real things happen here.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. It's a lot to take in and it's a lot to cover. It's a lot to kind of research and stay up to date on. So it kind of takes your breath away at times, but also gives you breath and life. So it's a good thing. Now let's jump into Bitwave, Pat, because this is super interesting. And I think you guys are kind of, cutting the road for other organizations doing this and for financial institutions to really work in harmony, if you will. And perhaps stay out of trouble, right? So can you give us an overview of Bitwave?
Yeah, absolutely. So Bitwave was started with a really simple mission in mind, honestly, which is that, I was in crypto for a long time, but I was also in enterprise software. And it occurred to me in, 2010, 2011, somewhere back then, that if crypto was successful and people started adopting crypto and paying bills with crypto and all that kind of stuff, businesses would also have to adopt it. Like businesses themselves might have adopted it first, but even that was a little specious. Like it was always going to be like retail users and then businesses. And so there was sort of a key point there, a key insight, which was if businesses are going to adopt digital assets, they are going to have a whole lot of problems that they run into because businesses are not used to managing their own money like this. Like some businesses are used to managing inventory. Like you think about like a weed business, like some weed businesses have their own armored trucks to move weed around. Like, there are some businesses out there that are kind of used to managing something that has a lot of value like that, but most are not. And so we said, like, look, there's gonna be a whole bunch of problems that come up for these businesses. Like, let's start a company that basically says, we are going to help solve the problems that businesses run into as they come across digital assets. And so obviously the first couple of problems that the big ones were accounting and tax, which is that it's actually incredibly complex to account for digital assets correctly on your books. And none of the big accounting products can handle it. So NetSuite, QuickBooks, SAP, none of them can handle accounting for digital assets out of the box. They all either require code or something else. And so we said, like, what we can do is we'll be the bridge. We will be that bridge that sits between the digital asset, the blockchains, your exchanges, whatever it is, your internal systems on this side, and then your accounting systems, your finance systems, your FP&A treasury systems on this side. We're just going to bridge the gap between those two and make it possible for you as a business to take digital assets, incorporate them into your business, recognize revenue, recognize expenses, get them into your ERP, and make your auditors happy at the end of the year. That then has now grown to, we, as every day we ask ourselves, like, well, what problems are businesses running into today? What problems are they running into today? Like, every day we ask ourselves, what problems are folks running into? And we've continued to solve more and more of those. So we've recently launched our financial operations product, which focuses on payments. So this is saying, like, hey, if you're going to be paying bills with crypto, how do we do that? Like, how do you pay bills of crypto in an enterprise? How do you make sure that the invoices get paid? How do you incorporate that with your overall workflow that you as an enterprise are running for invoice payments? How do you receive invoice payments? How do you make sure that you're getting paid what you expected to get paid? All that kind of stuff. We're looking more at treasury management. Like, how are treasurers at these organizations that have a lot of crypto handling it? What are they doing with it? Are they selling it? Are they buying it? Like, how do they hedge risk around it? All of that sort of good stuff. And then there's kind of more and more coming down the pike here. So it's been fun for us we just get to look at all the different things that businesses are doing around crypto and basically make plans and work with it. It's really fun.
Yeah, I would imagine your whole product team is just like every single day there's something added or something you need to review or a new regulation, whatever it may be.
New chains, new capabilities on chains, new things that someone does we've never seen before. I mean, you name it, we've seen all of it at this point. It is like, yes, every single day there is 10 brand new things to look at. Like right now, there's Blast is a new chain coming out right now. It's like you're keeping up on all this stuff. It's super fun, but boy, oh boy, is it exhausting.
I could imagine, and I'm glad there are folks like you guys doing it, because it's overwhelming. Just even the news is overwhelming. Forget about accounting; it's crazy.
Yeah.
For our listeners, just so they know, and it's kind of important for me to tell, for us to tell the audience, like, how many companies do you see? Like, what percentage of companies do you see handling crypto?
That's an interesting question, because I think you have a lot of different buckets of companies out there. Like, overall in the entire US, there's 50 to 100,000 companies, if not more. I mean, if you include like sole proprietors and stuff, that kind of narrows down as you go up the economic ladder to Fortune 2000, Fortune 500, Fortune 10. I would say one thing that we like to say is that within the Fortune 500, there's not a single company that is not looking at digital assets and blockchain. Every single one of them is looking at it for something, whether it be streamlining invoices and payments, supply chain management, internal treasury and budget review cycles, like whatever it is. Everyone's looking at it for something right now. And we'll see what happens over the next, like, as we kind of pull out of the bear market here and hopefully get into a little bit more of an exciting bull market. Like, and we're starting to see more adoption. We'll see what kind of happens from that. But, I think every single company in the Fortune 500 is touching crypto somehow. But none of them, I'd say there's probably less than 10 to 20 actual companies in the Fortune 500 that are doing anything demonstrable and material. They're like really actually have enough crypto on their balance sheet that they need to use products like Bitwave, that they need to actually track it, like that they actually have it as a material part of their business. So there's a long ways. If you just take the Fortune 500, which I think is a good barometer for the overall business ecosystem, there's a long ways to go. Like, there's a long ways to go. Outside that, there's a couple of thousand companies that are crypto native or consulting firms or law firms that want to take crypto, whatever it is that are out there. And that's all great. Those are, we love those. A lot of those are our customers, like the OpenSeas, the Magic Edens, the Pudgy Penguins. We love these guys all to death. But they're not the Fortune 500. They're all going to be the Fortune 500 in the next 10 years. And so it's like, how do we still keep an eye on like, what does the overall enterprise market look like? And it's just still growing. Like, it's still growing, and still very nascent, I think.
Yeah. I mean, at 10%, you got a long runway for you guys.
Long way to go.
That's awesome. It'll be interesting to see, because some of the crypto specific accountants I've spoken to, they dabble in a little law, because I think it all kind of coincides with a little bit of crypto accounting.
Yeah.
it's just interesting to see kind of them helping out small investors with this. But I can see where what you're saying here. Fortune 500, small amount right now, but it's growing. I can't wait to see like average size to small businesses getting involved. I can't see why not. And I would imagine some of the bigger companies, it's for speed and security, right?
Yep.
People who need to get funds over to their partners quickly. Now, with that said, a little side thought here is, I don't know if you subscribe or like to Michael Saylor or anything else, but his message to businesses has been, keep some Bitcoin on your balance sheet. And, one day he's a hero and the next day he's, washed out. Personally, I like him. I think he's rooted in the core foundations of Bitcoin and cryptography in general. What are your thoughts on that? Not that you're advising people what to do with their money, but what are your thoughts?
At the end of the day, I tend to be a real pragmatist on this stuff. And I think that, where someone like Saylor gets into trouble is that he tends not to be a pragmatist of it. That's his shtick. Like his shtick is not to be a pragmatist. His shtick is to be a maxi and to be to be basically religious about digital assets. And that's totally fine. Businesses can't be religious about digital assets as a general rule. Businesses, as a general policy, have to be incredibly even keeled about everything that they basically do. And so that is to say that you never want to get religious about anything with a business, whether that be your product or your employees or whatever it is. You are building a business that you want to survive for a long time. You have to be adaptable and you have to be able to change at a glance and all of that. So I agree at a high level that I think every business should have some digital assets on their balance sheet. Everyone should be exploring it and figuring out what it is and seeing how it adapts to their business. Because I think it will change. Most businesses will change in the next 10 years because of the digital asset ecosystem. But I don't think most companies should take 98% of their balance sheet and put it into crypto. I think that's a very risky thing to do, and most businesses should be more focused on cash rather than assets like that. So I don't know. Maybe that's a cop out answer, but it's businesses need to be pragmatic.
No, well said. It makes perfect sense. You can't go full in because then if the bottom falls out, you're fully out.
Yep.
You're no longer a player.
Yep.
But MicroStrategies, Michael Saylor, brass balls, man. You know what I mean? I gotta hand it to him. It's fun to watch. It gives me, makes your hair stand up.
And he's done well with it. They obviously made a lot of money. Like they made a lot of money on Bitcoin. So it's if you can do it, that's great. But just know that that's his business now. Is he's a hedge fund of Bitcoin. If you don't want your business to become being a hedge fund for Bitcoin, then don't put all your money into Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah, you can't. You just got to everything in moderation, right?
Yeah, everything in moderation. There you go,
man. Now, jumping back into Bitwave a little bit more. We touched on this a little bit, Pat. But the idea of laws and regulation. So with crypto literally under a microscope, right? I think of it as it's under a microscope being examined by people who maybe have half the knowledge or maybe less than that to actually make the right judgments.
And hidden agendas and things like that. That's the issue with Congress, isn't it? It's not a knowledge gap, although that could be part of it. It's that it's not voting your knowledge or your conscience. It's voting your lobbyists and your constituents. Well, less your constituents, more your lobbyists. But so it's Congress. The way Congress treats crypto is just so hard to tease apart because the web of alignment and incentives is just so incredibly difficult to see from outside the sausage factory.
Yeah, it is about agendas, and it's also about, it is new. They know it's picking up massive steam, right? Institutions getting involved, tons of individuals, and it's a hedge against a lot of things.
Yep.
And it's also, they're trying to figure out how you can game the system. You can't really, you can, but they want to have impenetrable defense against anything else. And I don't, that's not part of this whole world.
It's a different level of diligence that they've brought to crypto than they've brought to other industries or financial instruments. I mean, at the end of the day, crypto is a paltry nothing of a percentage of the worldwide crime dollars spent compared to the US dollar. The US dollar is the number one way that everything from terrorism to drugs gets funded is through the US dollar. And so, it's this really, that's where like the agendas here become so interesting, because it's a really classic thing of like, it's very easy to point at crypto and say, look at that thing that everyone's using crime for. It's crime right there. It's really hard to point the US dollar and say, boy, do we have a fundamental issue that people carry, buckets or briefcases of dollars across state lines to pay for drugs. One is an easy problem, or one is an attackable problem. One's a problem you can rally people against, and one is a completely intractable problem. And so of course the politicians tend to look at the more attackable problem, or the one that gets you a little bit more buzz.
Yeah, because you can track funds via the ledger.
Yeah.
There's an idea. And I love this, some of these stories like, it's like the Silk Road, no, the percentages are not there. It's not even
minuscule,
equal. Not even the same league. Now, with that said, with all these things happening so quick, I mean, you open Twitter right now and it's something probably will pop up. How do you keep we touched on a little bit, your staff and your clients up to date? Is it like, you get legal notices from maybe your lawyer about law changes every month or so? How does that work?
Gosh, what an interesting question. So we have a big team that works with, folks from these different agencies and the different groups that all do this. We work with a ton of the big four guys. We have a partnership with Deloitte. So, what happens is accounting does move slow. It's one of those things, like, people kind of joke about it, but there's like some of the accounting rules that have been, adopted over the last like 10 years for revenue recognition, we're 20 years in the making. And so the fact that like the accounting boards have actually kind of speed run getting guidance for crypto accounting out is somewhat amazing, but they still do it slowly. Like they announce that they're going to have a meeting about it. They then publish notes about it. They then take input from people in the industry. They then have another meeting about it, publish new notes. And there's this sort of like cycle that eventually gets you to a set of rules. So we take part in those conversations. We obviously, we've built our product to be incredibly flexible. So it's one of those things that like no one really agreed on how to do any of this. So when we started, no one agreed on how to do any of this stuff. So we built this incredibly flexible product that could pretty much do whatever you want to do. Whatever you want to throw a Bitwave, we could more or less handle from that side. So it was really easy. When as new rules change and things like that, it's been pretty easy to adapt to them. But it's a really interesting problem space. And then you just have to have a lot of communication. I'd say the thing that we do that we are the best in the world at is we are incredibly focused on customer support and customer success. And that's not, there are companies for whom that's a strategy. So there's companies that really intentionally go after a customer support product, to be their lifeline. That's not really my philosophy on it. My philosophy is a lot more that crypto accounting is so incredibly complex and changes so fast. If you don't have an open line of communication with your customers, you're just setting yourself up for a world of hurt. Like you really genuinely are setting yourself up for a world of hurt here. So we just have really open lines of communication with our customers, spend a lot of time with them, and make sure that they know what's coming down the pike, and they give us feedback on, hey, okay, well, if FASB does this, you guys need to do this, and then we're like, okay, great, we'll build that. So a lot of communication.
Yeah, all great points, Pat, because I'm in this this world, as a small investor, speaking engagements, writing, whatever it may be, designing, and it's tough to keep up, right? Forget about accounting, with the world of accounting, it's just tremendously detailed, to your point. Now, what would be one thing you'd want to say to people right now about cryptocurrency, kind of from a 40,000 foot view, one thing, if you were to tell them one thing about accounting.
Yeah. I get this question from time to time, and I always answer the exact same way. And it's that essentially with crypto, it's really easy to get wrapped up in the personalities, the projects, the launches, all of that kind of stuff. Crypto is like everything in this entire universe that humans build, which is it's a tool, right? And so like it's not a religion, it's not a philosophy. Like crypto is at the end of the day a tool. And like, those things get munged a little bit. Like, the religious aspect comes from decentralization. Like if you really believe the government shouldn't be allowed to stop you from spending money, then that you start to sneak a little bit more towards a political viewpoint or a religious viewpoint about crypto. But at the end of the day, like it's a solution to a problem. Like if the government can stop you spending money, crypto is a solution to that problem where you can spend it without government oversight. So my advice is always for people in crypto and for people looking to get into crypto is not to focus on the projects and not to focus on the personalities, but to step back and focus on the problems that crypto is solving and what it is that you are interested in about that. So, good examples of problems are, having to pay contractors in India. Right now, sending money to India through a wire can be as much as 10 to 15% fees that get tacked on top of that. And you can do that on Polygon for, 3 pennies and it gets transmitted instantly. So like there are really, really great problems that crypto is solving. But there's also a lot of things that's just like someone wanted to launch a new L2 because they can make a bunch of money selling the token. Like that's not a solution. That's a solution looking for a problem, I guess is always what people say. Like there has to be some problem that's so pressing that people need that new L2 for the new token or whatever it is. And it's easy to lose sight of that, but it's important not to. So always within crypto, always be thinking about like what problem is this solution solving? Is this token solving? Is this network solving? Like what is it? What's the problem that we're really solving here?
Yeah, all great points. And I love that it's important for people to understand that this is not a party affiliation. It's not a religion. It is a tool, and I 100% agree. In fact, when I was a young man, graduating college and you want to, dip your toes into stocks and bonds and whatever you want to get into. And I had some really good advice. Like, okay, you like that company? Is it the new shiny thing or the flash in the pan? Or is it rooted? Are there real people behind it? Building real products that
solving real problems that are out there.
Solving real problems, correct? Yeah,
solving real problems that are out there. It's the most important part of everything we do here. It's how to think about startups in general. It's how to think about AI too, right? Like even AI is a great example. Like so much AI noise right now is one of those things that like, is there a real problem that's being solved by this tech? A lot of times there's not. So just always keep your eye on like what's the problem that's being solved here.
Yeah, absolutely. Like companies like Chainlink, I was very partial to Chainlink.
Yeah,
because they're actually solving real world off-chain problems and to on-chain problems. Unbelievable. And people, they just ignore it. Okay. It's like the next AT&T. Like, okay, whatever you want to do. Let's see. With the US dollar and other currencies on fire right now, what do you think the world's reserve currency would be in the near future? I mean, I know this is purely speculative and fun, but what are your thoughts?
Well, the biggest, so it's an interesting question. I don't tend to think that Bitcoin will take a world reserve currency place. I think there'll be places where it does end up as a reserve currency, across South America, maybe across Africa. You can imagine some states that actually do pick it up as a reserve currency. The US dollar is not going anywhere. The euro is doing well, but the ECB is too opaque for really, it's too opaque and too, petty is not the right word, but it's too it follows too many whims. It's hard to like really always peg down what the ECB is going to do, And obviously the way that they structure the ECB is a huge problem that, that really Europe still is a collection of countries rather than a bunch of states, which is where you need to be to really have a powerful currency. You can't just have it be backed by, like the US dollar is backed by tanks and missiles. It's not backed by, it's not backed by other things. So the yuan is
gold or whatever.
Yeah, the yuan will never do it until they completely actually move it to a floating currency. The yuan will never have a chance of being a reserve currency of the world, and they're obviously doing more. There's kind of a separation between like reserve currencies from versus petrocurrencies. So the yuan is doing a good job picking up petrodollar kind of use cases. But at the end of the day, like it's really hard to imagine the U.S. dollar not continue for the civilized free world. It's really hard to imagine the U.S. dollar not continuing to be kind of the primary driver and the primary reserve currency across the world. And even like you look at like Venezuela. So Venezuela just had the presidential election, and they officially moved their currency over to the reserve currency, the U.S. dollar. I mean, it's too powerful a force right now. And even from the U.S. perspective, it's too powerful a force for freedom and democracy. I mean, the U.S. dollar is a incredibly powerful force for good in this world, as well as ill in some situations. But it's hard to imagine any currency besides the U.S. dollar really taking it, with the caveat that you'll have some very, very unique cases in a few parts of the world where I think Bitcoin could potentially be a really interesting option for them. It's interesting to see. Yeah, it's a tough one.
You never know. And I completely agree with you, Pat. The dollar is not going away. I think there's just a lot of consolidation that'll happen. People will either pack into it or completely leave. Right.
Yeah. It's an interesting question. Like, is when people talk about Bitcoin as a reserve currency, it's always a really interesting question. It's like, would Bitcoin, if people decide to regress from inflationary currencies as reserve currencies, would they really go to Bitcoin, or would we actually just see a return to the gold standard in a lot of places? And that's sort of a really interesting question. Is like, you might see a return to the gold standard in a few places, but there's very obvious reasons why we don't like the gold standard. And that has to do with deflationary pressures and all this other stuff. So, I mean, And more to the point, like, the ability to print money is an incredible tool. Like it literally meant that this really bad inflationary cycle, like control over the monetary policy meant that this pretty bad inflationary cycle has actually managed to be not that bad. I mean, it's not great for individuals, like, milk and everything's expensive, but the Fed did a very good job navigating through this inflationary cycle. And it's just like, it's sort of like results sort of speak for themselves a little bit. That is not, it is not easy to navigate through a hard inflationary period. And the Fed did a pretty good job of it. We're not out of it yet, but we're getting pretty close. And that says something about the Federal Reserve that I'm not sure most Bitcoin people want to say about the Federal Reserve, but it is impressive that they were able to kind of get out with the minimum damage up to this point. That doesn't say what's going to happen in the future.
Yeah, they're, are they perfect? No,
are they perfect?
Not at all. Not at all. But you, as U.S. citizens and maybe EU, you have to root for these people. You don't want anything really bad to happen, because then it'll make everything else bad, right?
Yeah, I often say that like the people who wish for the dollar to get destroyed so that Bitcoin's worth more. I'm like, I don't think you've really thought this one all the way through. I think there's some real issues with if the U.S. dollar gets destroyed. Like the least of your worries is how much Bitcoin you have floating around.
Yeah, I mean, it's nice to have that, I would say backup system, if you will. But yeah, it's not going anywhere. And people, you can't root against it to bump your own gains. The gains will be there. They will be there as the network grows.
The gains should be coming not from deflation of the U.S. dollar or depreciation of the U.S. dollar, but from general use cases going up. The actual utility of the network and the utility of the tokens going up. Like that's what should be driving this stuff. And it's and that again, we talked a lot at the beginning of this about this, like the different philosophies that people bring into crypto. And obviously, this is one of those philosophies is that some people do think of crypto as that hedge to the end of the world, scenario. But boy, oh boy, is that not a fun one to think about.
Oh boy. Yeah. And it's ongoing. But,
yeah.
I think, Pat, we could have a whole other separate podcast for that, for sure. Or a round table.
Anytime you want, man.
Super fun. That would be fun. one of the things, since we're talking about Bitwave and, Web3 companies and utility, I always like to kind of lift the hood a little bit and get a better glimpse at what your team is like, globally or locally, engineers. What does it look like?
Yeah, we're a totally remote team. We have folks in over, let me get the numbers here, 15 states and 7 countries. So 60 people, something like that, spread all around the world. It's been great. We started in 2018, but we really grew the most during the pandemic. And so it was kind of one of those things, like we were growing through the pandemic. It's like, well, are we really going to like force people to be in one particular place? You have to be in this 7x7 mile radius, but we're not going to see you for 2 years. Like, no, it's just sort of silly. It creates a lot of, the things that I get down on the government about it creates a lot of complexity. Like having employees in a lot of different parts of the world creates a lot of complexity, and there's a lot of overhead. And it's one of those things that if I were a politician, that's something that I would spend a lot of time. I don't know if anyone cares about it besides me. It's like there's a pretty narrow view of people that employ a lot of people in a lot of different states that like where it is such a pain in the neck to employ them and pay taxes, and like we have to file zero. We had an employee one time in Washington or somewhere, and we don't have them anymore, and so we have to file for the next like 5 years. We have to file $0 tax returns with Washington. Just stuff like that just drives me crazy. It's by far like the most difficult part of a remote company, but you save a lot of money on real estate. You save a lot of money on other things there, and people are just happier. I mean, everyone, it creates a very different kind of corporate culture where I think a lot more people have a lot more, everyone works really hard. It's, everyone's waking up early and staying late, but then at the same time, everyone has a pretty good work-life balance because they're home with their kids or they see them or like whatever. You're not, there's 2 hours a day of commute time that you get to put towards, maybe half is towards more work and half is towards like hanging out with your kids and stuff. So it's one of those things that really is I really think remote work is here to stay. Even for us, we'll eventually have a few more locations. Like we'll have like an office here, an office there if people go into that want to. And we kind of have that today, but it's interesting. It's an interesting time.
Yeah, you create a home base, and then for important big meetings or decision making, brainstorming sessions, you bring the team together. Or
crypto conferences are all over the world, so like we see each other most at conferences. Like there's right. We all go to ECC, so we see the East Coast and European teams at ECC. We see the West Coast teams at I don't know, whatever. Like the Bitcoin Miami, soon to be Bitcoin Nashville. Like that's you see them at the conferences rather than seeing them face to face at offices.
Yeah, that's true. It's usually like a whole lot of pregame going on. Like who's going to be there? What are we going to talk about? After or during the conference. So yeah, it's a great point actually. You use those necessary platforms to kind of congregate and do some extra work. That's really cool. And we talk to a lot of different protocols and apps and, different Web3 companies all the time. And, a lot of their staff is like, I develop in Solidity and, I live across the country and I only want to be paid in, in Bitcoin or Ethereum. The rules are changing. Like really
rules
fast.
Are changing.
The amount of people I see that are just like, no cash. I don't want euros. I just want crypto.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yep.
And by the way, I work during this time slot, and that's it. People are getting pretty. Yep. But I've seen a lot of companies really, to your point, it is hyper challenging, and I've seen a bunch of them do a pretty good job of kind of juggling all those kind of multiple locations and various employees. So that's good.
It's a different world. It's a different kind of way of working. And it's honestly, the other way to think about it is it's not for everybody. Like not every employee that works for you should be working remote. Some employees really do need to be, in order for them to be productive, they need to be in an office with someone watching over their shoulder. And I don't mean that in a Big Brother kind of way. I just mean like some people are not great at self-motivation and some people are. And that's like remote work companies lend themselves, like you have to be very, very self-motivated. And like, it's not always easy to tease that out at the beginning, but you see it pretty quickly when someone's working for you.
Yeah, that's a great point, Pat. So if you're a younger person coming out of college, you kind of bank on the whole idea of working directly with your manager.
Yeah, having someone really offer you a lot of guidance and stuff like that. Yeah.
Yeah, and code, in coding and design or whatever it may be, that's really important. And kind of formulating a little bit of that kind of learning culture is really important. But there are tools to help with that, of course. Pat, as we wrap up a little bit here, one of the cool things that I get to do is talk to people like you every day, and you guys are entrepreneurs in a very innovative, rapidly growing industry. If you were to tell anyone an entrepreneur who wants to kind of start a DApp or a platform or a currency, maybe, who knows, what kind of advice would you give that person, as an entrepreneur yourself?
Yeah, same advice I gave for people looking in the industry in general. It's that all entrepreneurship starts with the problems, not with the solutions. So if you are an entrepreneur, find a problem space that you know well, find a problem that you are passionate about, and then the product you're building is the solution to that problem. It's very easy to I can't tell you how many times I've seen someone who saw something cool. Like they're like, oh, I love blockchain, and I want to do blockchain for graphic design or like whatever. Like that's not like you need to start with there has to be some problem that you see in the world or that you see in your life or that you see in your company that needs to be solved. And that's where you start, and then you figure out how to solve it, and then you figure out people pay money to solve it. And like that is by itself, that is entrepreneurship. That's capitalism at its very core. Is there's a need or a problem. I'm cold, so someone made a jacket. Like I need a house, someone built a house. Like it is a problem driven discipline. If you get wrapped around the technology, it's like AI is a great example. It's like every company that I see that says AI plus blockchain, I'm immediately very skeptical of. Not to say there might not be some good ones, because that's a technology, that's a solution, that's not a problem. Like problems are, discovering fraud automatically, and that's where you could apply AI to the blockchain. But so it's one of those things. Like always be very problem driven as an entrepreneur.
Yeah. I with the AI thing, because we get into a little bit of that as well. Don't ram it in. Don't force fit it.
Yep.
If it solves a problem, like for example, I could see it really being useful AI for supply chains through NFTs.
Yep.
Right. That would be amazing, and you're solving a little bit of a problem there. But it doesn't have to be forced. And let's understand Web3 first.
Yep.
Let's understand the blockchain first. Get through regulations, get through a lot of stuff. Like we're in our infancy right now.
Yep. We're in our infancy.
We're just a speck. So don't force it. And most people don't even understand AI and the power of it, and actually how to use it properly.
So that's for sure. It's going to be the next few years are going to be very, very disruptive for technology. I mean, for everybody in the world with AI coming out. I mean, it's really going to be an interesting time period. I don't know what's going to happen. As an engineer, I don't know what's going to happen. As an entrepreneur, I don't know what's going to happen. It's going to be a really interesting, 5 years here to see what happens.
Well, I mean, you're talking about, platforms like yours, which is predicated 100% on code, basically.
Yeah.
And, now we have AI systems literally every day coming out that is saying, oh, we'll write your JavaScript. It'll write your JavaScript perfectly, or it'll do this perfectly. And it's not perfect.
Yeah, it's not perfect.
And it's not, it's just like, it's just literally starting out. How could it be perfect? Or even close to being perfect. But I agree. I think there's going to be, and, most people use the term disruptive for industries, right? But I think disruption can be in the form of kind of confusion.
Yeah.
Right. And I wholeheartedly agree with that. There is a lot of confusion, and that's why these podcasts exist. That's why this dialogue happens, is to eliminate some of the confusion and kind of bring you back down to ground a little bit.
That's the goal. That's what we're all here for.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's all, it's great to learn about Bitwave, but it's also amazing to have someone like yourself and your background kind of lay out some of the fundamentals for people.
Yeah.
So it's great. Now, Pat, do you guys have any conferences coming up, events you want to kind of give a shout out to?
Well, you can always find Bitwave, www.bitwave.io. We're on Twitter at Bitwave_platform. We're going to be we do have a bunch of events coming up, but they're all listed on our Twitter page. Is the best place to see us. We'll have folks at the Sage conference in February, some of the other Bitcoin conferences. Actually, caught me off guard with that question. I didn't even look, but yeah, at Bitwave_platform on Twitter, and you can find us there.
Awesome. Yeah, you can always send that info, and I'll have it in the links below if you'd like.
Amazing.
Yep. We always like to share our guests and what they're doing, and you guys build a community. We didn't even get into the whole community aspect of it, but a lot of companies like yours are predicated on not just engineers in their community, but people who are tracking and learning and contributing to it in some way, shape, or form. So community is super important.
Very
These
important.
conferences,
Yep.
to your point earlier, the conferences are great congregation places with your team or outside of your team. And I would encourage our entire audience to really dig in, look into Bitwave for your organization, whether you're medium, small, or large. Generally, it's the bigger boys that are using this right now, but we work
with everyone from small startups through Fortune 500 companies. So everyone in between is welcome. Would love to talk to you.
Perfect. Yeah. Awesome, Pat. Thank you so much. I look forward to, potential future Bitwave and outside of Bitwave discussions.
I love it. We'll do this again for sure. Hit me up any time. Would love to be on. This has been a delight.
Yes, thank you so much, Pat.
All right.